What is going on, alpha males? Welcome to the Alpha Male Podcast, the podcast where we talk about what it means to be a man made in the image of God, strong, dominant, and in control. We don't apologize for that. We don't let society dictate what we're supposed to be. We listen to God, the Almighty, our Creator. He made us to be strong and dominant, and we don't apologize for that. Talking about God and the Word, because in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Part of that word, Deuteronomy 28. Blessed shall you be in the city, and blessed shall you be in the country. Now, if you don't know, the wife and I live as neo-nomads. Just got done with a stint off-grid living in the hills, in the Black Hills of South Dakota. And I really enjoy that. Jesus often went out to deserted places to rest a while. And I had just done a fairly long, what was long for me, several months east of the Mississippi. My wife wanted to be close to her family and visit nieces and nephews, and let's just say not my favorite place. I much prefer the wide open spaces. But I have spent large stints of my life in large urban areas, as you'll hear when I get into an abbreviated version of the bio. But I'm here to serve you guys, and I know that many of you live in urban, suburban environments. I've been there. You live in a house or a townhouse or condo or an apartment, and you get into a vehicle and you drive to be in another box, a office, a cubicle, whatever it is. You spend the vast majority of your life surrounded by boxes and squares. So is the life of the majority of Americans. I'm here to serve you. I've been there. I've lived in that world. And I still can live in that world. Blessed shall you be in the city, and blessed shall you be in the country. So I recently did an episode on everyday carry. I thought it would be a good time to talk to you about urban everyday carry. I'm big on the concept of everyday carry. I think you as the man, as an alpha male, it is your job, part of what you exist for, to protect and provide for those around you, those under you, under your headship. You should be able to provide and protect, to love your neighbor as yourself. Be able to provide and protect yourself and your neighbor. I'm big on the concept of E.D.C, everyday carry. This is a pretty long preamble. I'm going to do a quick abbreviated version of the bio. I am your host, Michael Milito. First and foremost, I am a Christian, a follower of God, and a servant of Jesus Christ. That is number one in my life, and everything that I do. And this podcast is no different. And I don't apologize for that either. Also, God has blessed me to get me through safely and protected me through many things in life. Marine Corps combat veteran, also served in the U.S. Army, both full-time and part-time National Guard. Also law enforcement. I was LAPD. I worked regular assignments and more specialized assignments. FBI certified firearms instructor, handgun instructor. A state rifle and pistol champion several times over in several different states. I have been a private contractor for a 3-letter government agency that I will not specify. I was the commander of a tactical team in a large metropolitan area to stop active shooters. That was our primary mission, and I was blessed to be the commander of that team. Part of that I don't often mention, a big part of that job was executive protection. I'm talking A-list celebrities, and I don't often talk about that because I don't value really their life more than anybody else's. You know, more than the 6-year-old girl or the old lady. They're really just another person to me. But I dealt with them a lot and did operational orders and stuff like that all the time, working with those people. I'm talking the biggest of the big. I'm talking working with the Secret Service. I'm talking like the biggest of the big names in entertainment. And I did that as part of my job because they drew vast crowds of people, and that attracts active shooters. And that was our job, to stop active shooters. And some of that executive protection involved me in a 3-piece suit, carrying a gun, very much in a suit and tie. I might be in a board meeting with people in multi-million-dollar companies, giant entertainment conglomerates, things like that. And I've worked some of the nastiest streets in LA, doing fugitive recovery. So I know how to operate in an urban environment. Again, blessed shall you be in the city and blessed shall you be in the country. I want to share that with you. So whether you're wearing a pair of cargo shorts and a Hawaiian shirt, or you're wearing a 3-piece suit, having good urban everyday carry equipment. Okay, let's get into it. I recently did a whole episode on my normal everyday carry. I'm going to go over it again very briefly here. If you want more in depth, go listen to that episode. But I generally everyday carry a full-size fighting handgun. My main one, I consider my best one, is a SIG 226 single action only Legion mounted with a Trijicon RMR. I carry a backup magazine. I carry a tourniquet, a good E.D.C belt, a fixed blade knife, a way to purify water, a ferro rod, a few other small things like fish hooks, fishing line, and some other things. A wallet, obviously, cell phone, and of course the Bible app with many different versions of the Bible, some of them downloaded so I don't need service, so I can always have a Bible on me. That's one of the great things. I'm not big on technology all the time, but that is a great blessing to be able to have not just a Bible, but several different translations of a Bible in my pocket on my phone. What an amazing blessing that is. Could you imagine what people in the Middle Ages would have done to be able to have a Bible that compact in their pocket? Okay, now that was a brief description of my normal E.D.C. How do we adapt this for the urban environment? I'm going to start, since we started with the cell phone, some useful things. I have a couple of survival apps on my phone, U.S. Army, like survival book app, I forget exactly what it's called, and the SAS survival guide. You might want to download those, but those are largely for wilderness environments. What I think is really good and handy and will cost you nothing is wherever you work, or if you're at home, next time you're at work or at home listening to this, plan a route on your GPS, Google Maps, whatever you use on your phone, and plan a route home or to work. You know what I'm talking about. Plan the route. And then where it gives you the option to select different routes, select different routes. Go to your settings and put in avoid freeways. All those different routes. You can have those and take screenshots of them and store them on your phone. That way, if something happens, especially in a big catastrophe, oftentimes cell service goes down because so many people are trying to use the network. Even if you know how to get home the normal way, what if that normal way is blocked? What if roads are shut down for rioting, civil unrest? What if you just can't go that way? There's some kind of accident, train derailment is a recent thing. Like, have primary, alternate, contingency, emergency routes home, and have screenshots and store them somewhere on your phone. Maybe store them in your favorites so you can actually find them if you have thousands of pictures on your phone. So having those screenshots of different routes, you can even click on the bottom on Google Maps, and it will give you turn-by-turn instructions. You can take screenshots of that as well. So if you live more than a mile or two from your house and there's any kinds of twists and turns from where you work, then you might want to do that. You might want to have those screenshotted and on your phone. Another really cool thing to go in conjunction with that, I don't know if it comes on the phone, you have to download it. I have my phone a long time. But the Compass app, the compass on your phone, the one that I have, you do not need service for that compass to work, and it works really well. It's a pretty precise compass. I think you'd have to spend a pretty big chunk to get a comparable compass. And you're probably, if you're urban everyday carrying, unless it's like a button compass, you're probably not carrying a big compass around like a Lensatic compass in your pocket. That's probably not part of your E.D.C. So having that compass app and knowing where it's at on your phone, if you do need it, especially if you're in a big urban environment and you happen to be somewhere where you haven't been before, inside a giant building, mall, complex, it can be pretty easy to get disoriented. A parking garage, something like that, getting your bearings can be pretty important. So having that compass app, pretty important. Also, storing a little bit of cash in your cell phone case. Cash can come in pretty handy. How many times have you forgotten your wallet, but you remembered your cell phone? At least if you need a couple of gallons of gas, or you need to buy a meal, or whatever the case might be. At least for the time being, you can still use cash, American currency. It might be good to have a little bit of that American currency stacked, just a couple of, like $20 or whatever you decide to put back there. Just enough, again, a couple of gallons of gas, a meal, have that in the back of your cell phone case. Next, I want to mention shoes. Shoes are important. I think a lot of times we gravitate towards weapons and arms, and I think that's important, and I'm going to get there. But in order for your hands to do the fighting, your feet have to get you there. And even if you have to wear dress shoes, again, I've been there. I've been in corporate management where I had to wear a 3-piece suit and a tie. And just a brief aside, how is it that so many men on a daily basis voluntarily tie a noose around their neck and wear it? Because it's some kind of social acceptance. What a strange thing. Anyway, I've been in that world. Even if you have to wear dress shoes, there are some very good dress shoes that absolutely are pretty good as running shoes. You should have, I'm not talking about like the Bates I was issued early on in the Marine Corps that you have to polish and stuff like that. Have like dress shoes that look dressy and look nice, whether brown or black or loafers, but some are better than others. Some are simply there for show and they look like dress shoes and they're horribly uncomfortable, and normally you're sitting in a cubicle, so it doesn't matter. But get good dress shoes. Like Skechers makes dress shoes that they look like dress shoes, but they run like tennis shoes. Get a good pair of shoes if you have to wear those kind of shoes. And if you don't just think about fashion, right? Don't just wear Chucks because they're what you like in fashion. Get a pair of shoes that is actually functional, like a good pair of shoes. All right, the next piece of kit I'm going to get to, you'll know that I'm a big fan of you as a man carrying a knife. If you listen for any length of time, you also know I'm a big fan of carrying a fixed blade knife. I think it has a lot of advantages in melee situations. However, I know many people won't, but I would encourage you to look at fixed blade knife. But most people carry folders. My number one recommendation usually is a Buck 110 Slim, and it's a phenomenal knife. It's a formidable fighting weapon. You can also butcher an elk with it. I used one often when I was a professional big game hunter and guide. Didn't mention that in the abbreviated bio because I didn't think it would be relevant, but it's a good knife for that. It's a good knife for butchering animals, a good knife for hunting, skinning, cleaning, fishing, wild game, but you're probably not dealing with that in an urban environment. It's still a good knife. If you already have one, it's a great E.D.C option. There are some other really good options for urban everyday carry folding knives. A knife that I would carry if I wanted to be really, really clandestine. Like I was doing an op, a lot of times I would do an op, and sometimes we would want to be very over and out in the open and in your face saying, hey, we're heavily armed and dangerous. This is not a soft target. Go somewhere else. Like that was a lot of times part of our job was to be very visible. I'm talking body armor, I'm talking war belts, I'm talking, fighting rifles. Sometimes we wanted to blend in. Sometimes myself or somebody else was plain clothes. So in those very plain clothes operations, wanting to blend in, I would often carry a Cold Steel Tough Light. It's a good name. The knife I found was tough and was light. I since gave it to my wife because it's a lightweight E.D.C option for her, but it's a pretty straight blade, kind of a sheep's foot design. You don't have to know what that is, but it's a decent, small, but still effective knife. So if you're looking for an ultralight, you're not normally carrying a E.D.C folding knife and you want a good place to start, that is a good place to start. I would modify it slightly. Whatever pants I was going to be wearing most of the time, I would paint the clip on that knife the same color as my pants. If you paint that clip the same color, in general, I'm not going to say it's invisible, but unless somebody's really up close on you, they're probably not going to even notice the clip in your pocket. Maybe you don't even have to go that clandestine. Maybe you don't even worry about it. But if you are worried about it, if it is concerning that somebody might spot a knife in your pocket, I don't think carrying it deep in your pocket is a good idea, because the whole idea to have it for a defensive tool is to get to it quickly. So, again, painting the handle of that knife, and the Tough Lights, are cheap enough that you could have two. I mean, if you normally wear black or khaki pants, right, you could have one handle painted black and one handle, the clip I'm talking about, not the handle, sorry. The clip you could have painted khaki on one and black on the other. And whatever color pants you were wearing, you could slip it right in your pocket, and probably nobody is going to be the wiser. It's going to blend in really well unless they're really up close. Whatever kind of folding knife it is, I stress having a locking knife. Locking is important. If automatics are not prohibited where you are in your jurisdiction, a lot of times you can carry a full-size fighting handgun totally legally and legit with a CCW, but still automatic knives are prohibited and a felony sometimes. So check your knife laws, but if you can have a automatic knife, the Gerber 06 Auto, and they make several different versions of it, but I think the best urban version of it is the Gerber 06 Auto Tonto, partially serrated. Not the best all-around knife. I'm not saying it's the best all-around E.D.C knife, but for urban carry and a melee weapon, it is absolutely a formidable weapon. It was my go-to E.D.C knife for years, and I really worked that thing. I abused it. It's a good knife. Gerber 06 Auto Tonto, partially serrated. Again, you can paint it to match your environment, meaning the pants that it's in. For some people in some jurisdictions, a knife may be your only defensive tool. If that's the case, you may not want to follow this next advice, but I generally carry a handgun on my dominant side. For me, that's right-handed. I'm right-handed, right-eye dominant. So I generally carry my go-to knife on my left side. That way I have a defensive option on both sides. If that arm is broken or shot or being pinned behind my back while my face is getting pounded into the pavement, I have a defensive option on the other side that I can access. Or if I'm in a wrestling match trying to keep my gun in the holster so somebody can't pull it out, then I can grab that knife and use it as a get off me and implementation to get somebody off of me and to keep retention of that firearm. So I like that knife on the opposite side. But have a good, assuming you're going to carry a folding knife, have a good folding knife. It doesn't have to be a big blade. I'm actually more concerned about the handle than the blade, because you need a good solid grip on that knife. But have a good defensive option for the knife, and the knife is used for many other things. You can use it for a myriad of other things. But I like it to be a defensive option if I ever needed it. The next thing that I don't generally carry in my normal day-to-day, because I'm not generally anymore in an urban environment, you might want to consider for urban everyday carry. Lock picks. Now check your jurisdictions, check your municipalities. I have heard, I've never seen it, but I have heard that in some places it's illegal to carry lock picks. But I think if you listen to the Manly Skills episode, which was a long ago, lock picking absolutely is a good skill and not for any nefarious purpose. How many times have you locked yourself out of a shed or a gym locker or any number of things? You go out the front door and shut your door and you realize, oh, your keys are in the house, right? Any number of situations, lock picks can come in handy. Picking locks is not that hard. It was one of the things I would teach as the commander of a tactical team, especially when we're on like a stakeout, like a long hour stakeout and people were bored out of their mind. Say, hey, let's learn some skills. Maybe knot tying is a great skill to learn. Maybe Lockpicking, absolutely a legitimate skill. Can you kick in most doors? Yes, but sometimes, again, you want to be overt. Sometimes kicking that door is the right decision. Sometimes opening that door quietly is a better move. Having lockpicks and knowing how to use them, and again, not for any nefarious purpose. You shall not steal. That's the word of God. Also, if a man is caught breaking in and is struck so that he dies, there shall be no guilt for his bloodshed. But what if you're trying to escape and evade? What if you're trying to get out of an area? What if, there's a certain area blocked off and there's a mob or rioting happening, and they're coming towards you, and you find yourself up against something, and you need to open that door, open that gate? Having those lockpicks. If you're familiar with lockpicks, most locks are not that hard to open. They're really not. And I think you might find they come in pretty handy for day-to-day stuff. And there's lockpick sets that comes with all manner of lockpicks, like over a dozen. I've found in my lockpicking experience that generally I'll use 3, and 3 only, like for 80 to 90% of locks. So those would be the only 3 that I would carry. I would carry a tensioner, which is like a small piece of metal with a 90-degree bend in it that you use to actually turn the lock, and something you use to push the tumblers. Usually just a single triangle pick, and then sometimes a double-sided triangle pick, because some locks are double-sided, just like some keys, when you look at them, they have teeth on both sides. That's not super common, but it's not super rare, so having a double-sided pick also can help. But those 3 picks, really, they're small, they're light, those 3 picks. You don't even need to climb with the bigger handles, just a small, minuscule picks. Put a little rubber band around them, throw them in your pocket. They're small, they're light, they're handy. I think absolutely a good idea for urban everyday carry. Now let's talk about the belt. My number one belt, and has been for years, is the 511 TDU. It's a good belt. I like the 1.75 inch as long as your belt loops will support it. If not, you may look at the 1.5 inch, but absolutely a good belt. And the ones that I have, one side is a tactical color and the other side is black. And they don't look tactical. They're a good tactical belt, but they don't scream tactical. You could literally wear them with suit pants and they would look normal. It would just look like a black belt. Nothing crazy about it. There's no Cobra buckle or anything on it. So again, it doesn't scream tactical, but it's a good tactical belt. And it's my go-to everyday carry belt, and has been for years, and I generally carry a full-size fighting handgun. So it's good to go for that. If you need something a little bit fancier and dressier, look at your local police supply store if you live in a city, because this is urban everyday carry. If you live in a fairly large city, there's probably a police supply store. Go look at their inner leather belts. They're usually pretty robust and rugged, and good belts, not just for an inner police belt, but also for you. They're good, they're dressy, they look nice, you can polish them, they have shiny buckles, and they're sturdy. They're meant to be worn for years by police officers. They're good, sturdy, generally stiff belts. So if you want a little bit dressier option, maybe look at that. Since I would encourage you, if at all possible, to carry your firearm strong side belt, the way I generally carry is I'll just have an overshirt, like a button-up shirt that I don't button. Like right now I'm wearing a black and white plaid cotton shirt. Just drape it over my E.D.C. Nobody is the wiser carrying a full-size fighting handgun and a spare magazine and a tourniquet. Right? It goes straight down with gravity. My waist is smaller than my chest. It covers all that up. If that's not an option for you, you may look at inside the waistband. And I know from experience wearing a suit jacket or a sport jacket, you can easily carry a full-size fighting handgun covertly, nobody being the wiser, with either a small of the back holster or a behind the hip holster. It's a little bit farther back than I would normally like it, but generally you can carry a pretty big gun back there with just a suit coat or a sport coat. So if that's the kind of dress that you are normally going to do, then you might think about that. You might think about small of the back or behind the hip. If you are going to pocket carry, there are plenty of good pocket guns. The old classic Smith & Wesson J-frame, it's still a decent option if you need to go super inconspicuous. They make the featherweights and the airweight super lightweight. Especially, I encourage you as a man, wear a belt. But if you do, even if you don't wear a belt, for most people, you can carry that gun in your pocket without a belt. So if you're a guy that just doesn't like belts, doesn't generally wear a belt, something like one of those Smith & Wesson J-frame airweights or featherweights in 38 Special 357 Magnum, they're a really good pocket gun. I know there are small semi-autos, and I've toyed around with those over the years, but the problem is, even if they're smaller, they're square, and my body is not, my legs aren't square, so if I put a square gun in there, it kind of prints. The J-frame, since it's round and has rounded edges, when I put it in my pocket, it blends in pretty well. If I'm wearing a pair of, let's say, cotton Dockers, I can put that in my pocket and really nobody is the wiser. So if you're talking about pocket carry and really being inconspicuous, you might look at that. If you want a little bit bigger pocket carry, you might look at something like a 365. If you're going to, on the belt, inside the waistband, something like that, you may look at the 365 XL. Glock 26 is a good option because it takes regular Glock mags, not like proprietary mags like a Glock 43 or something. The Glock 26, it's still not a very big gun, and you have the ability with using bigger magazines. You could carry a spare full-size magazine, or even a spare larger than standard 17-round magazine for your backup mag if you felt the need to, or in your vehicle or something like that. And I would encourage you, if you can, if you have an outer garment like we talked about, look for a good behind the hip or small of the back holster. It's not the fastest, but I still think it's a pretty good option if you need to be really covert and carry a full-size fighting handgun. Now let's talk about how you can carry a little bit more urban E.D.C. What is something that would not be out of place in most urban suburban environments, even most offices, most cubicle environments? A laptop bag. Now, I did an entire episode on laptop bag guns. You may want to go back and give that a listen. But a laptop bag, that gives you a lot of real estate in the E.D.C. world, and it's not out of place in most urban environments. A little tactical tip here: if you live in an environment where snatch and grabs are a thing, it's often not uncommon for somebody to try and take that bag away. Sometimes they'll try and come up and for a woman's purse or a man's bag or something, and literally with a knife cut the strap and grab it and run. One thing you can do is take a piece of picture frame wire or baling wire, something similar, and run it inside the strap. Going back to the flashlight, if you carry a small E.D.C. flashlight in your laptop bag, you could have a beefy, decent, large flashlight. Right, so you could have that. A good flashlight, and if you get them bright enough, they can be kind of a deterrent. Not a weapon, but a deterrent. Also, going back, fixed blade. If you're not carrying a fixed blade, have a decent fixed blade in here. It doesn't have to be a Rambo knife, but a decent sized fixed blade. Also, and or a multi-tool. Now, a multi-tool is a really good thing to have. I don't care what brand it is, but a good, full-size, usable multi-tool, there's really no reason not to have one. My one caveat is I would get a multi-tool where the cutting blade actually locked. I'm not a big fan of blades that don't lock. So I don't care what brand, but get one with a locking blade. And whatever other tools you may decide are important, a saw, a file, a pair of pliers, you may find that comes in handy day to day, just for normal situations, a good multi-tool. But you could have that in there. If you want some other options, you could carry a pretty decent size pepper spray in there. Sitting next to me in my vehicle right now, I don't E.D.C it anymore. I don't live in an urban environment, but a small collapsible baton. ASP makes some really small, lightweight aluminum collapsible batons, much smaller than the standard issue like police officer collapsible baton. You might have that in there. You might have flexi cuffs in there. Like workplace violence and active shooters, they're a thing nowadays. Having some of that stuff in your kit, you might want to consider it. Also, less tactical, you might want to throw in some snacks in there, right? A couple of Quest bars, a couple of those things you normally see at the checkout, like the sleeves of peanuts that are like 2 for $1 or whatever they are now with inflation. Having a snack like that that's healthy. If you're going to have a bag like this, a lot of them have the little zippers with the holes in them so you can lock the bag. I would encourage you to have a small lock, unless you have like a locker where you work or something like that. Having just a small lock that you can put on this, that way unauthorized personnel can't get into it. And don't worry about it if you lock yourself out of it, because if you're carrying the lock picks we talked about earlier, you can just get right back into it again. Also, in this bag, if you're carrying a laptop bag, you may want some backup documentation. Just like literally, you remember old paper copies and copy machines? Having paper copies of driver's license, your wife's driver's license, things like that. Phone numbers written down in case you smash, lose your phone, whatever the case might be. Do you even know the phone numbers of important people in your life? Having written copies of that stuff, a written photocopy of your ID in case something bad happens and you don't have your wallet or you forgot your wallet that day. Common things like that. If you want to handwrite or have a couple of checks in there, if people still use checks, you might want something like that in there, a way to pay. Also, kind of a tactical tip, you can write down your bank account and routing number and just use a simple code. Like you can add 7 to every number, right? And you'll know what your actual number is. And the CIA can probably crack that, but let's be honest, the CIA probably just get your bank account number anyway. The average person that sees that is not going to be able to do anything with it. They don't know to multiply by or to subtract 7 from every number on your bank account and routing number. I'm just using an example. That's a quick, easy code that you can use to encrypt, very simple encryption on data like that. But you might want some valuable paper, copies of IDs, things like that. Going back to where we started, you might want a paper map, like a Thomas guide or something like that in there if you plan on things get real bad while you're away from home and you have to get home. And you might think, well, that's what a bug out bag is for, but I know some urban environments, if you park in like a parking garage and things get really bad, you are probably not carrying your bug out bag into your office. Especially in really big urban environments, you may have to park quite a ways away from where you park your vehicle. And if you getting to your vehicle may likely get you killed in a disaster, then that's kind of breaking number one rule of survival, right? Survive. So you might have to write off your vehicle and everything in it for whatever reason. Having a laptop bag with a few things in there that you have with you is better than having the bug out bag that's totally decked out, that's a giant, U.S. Marine Corps rucksack with all the stuff in there, the tent and the sleeping bag that you can't get to anymore. It's been looted, it's been burned, it's in a riot zone, whatever the case might be, right? It's not feasible for you to get it. So it can be a modular system. If you get back to your vehicle in your bigger bag, fine, then just throw your laptop bag inside it. But some ideas to think about for urban everyday carry. Amendment 1, medical. I mentioned I E.D.C a tourniquet. I hope that you E.D.C a tourniquet. I'm going to mention, I think, almost unarguably, of the common tourniquets, the best one for an adult human being is the cat tourniquet. Whatever newer generation cat tourniquet. They're, I think, the easiest to use, really robust, effective, quick. They are the best. I'm going to go out and tell you that I don't E.D.C a cat tourniquet. I E.D.C a rat tourniquet and a spare magazine pouch behind my primary reload because it's on me all the time. I have actually had to use a tourniquet before in a life or death situation. And I actually had to improvise one with a belt and an ice scraper. And although, praise God, it worked, after that, I'm pretty diligent about E.D.C.ing a tourniquet. The rat is one that I will carry all the time instead of carrying it sometimes and it being inconvenient. The rat is a tourniquet. Also, the SWAT T, it's like a big elastic kind of workout band, if you want to think about it that way. But depending on how you want to carry a tourniquet, I would encourage you to carry a tourniquet. If you're not going to carry one on your person, I would encourage you to carry one in that laptop bag. Going to the laptop bag, not only would I have a tourniquet or two in here, I would have a full medical kit. I recommend Refuge Medical. They're the kits that I have and that I run. I also agree fairly well theologically with the founder and CEO of that. But Refuge Medical or North American Rescue, but a good quality first aid kit. Whichever one you think is going to fit really well in that kit. The PA kit, it's called the PA kit, medical kit, that might fit really good and sleek into one of these laptop bags. And again, I would throw in a couple of tourniquets. Like, don't just go full out tactical Rambo. I would rather have, the full-size fighting handgun with 2 spare magazines and 2 tourniquets than the full-size fighting handgun and 5 magazines and no tourniquets. Being that a tourniquet is about the same size as a magazine. So, have some tourniquets, right? I would also have other stuff, a chest seal, compression bandage, but if you have any kind of small bag, a medical kit, I think absolutely should go in there. Also, in the laptop bag, you're in an urban environment, shelter is probably going to exist. But if power goes out, you might get cold even inside a shelter. If you're talking like Chicago or Detroit, and you have to hunker in place, and the grid is down, it's probably going to get cold. So one of those Mylar survival blankets, they're lightweight, they don't take up a lot of room, they weigh very little. They do work. I've used them not in urban environments, but I've used them out in the wilderness. They do actually work. They're not just a gimmick. And they're cheap and they're lightweight. And also, talking about medical, if you lose quite a bit of blood, which I've been there, you get really cold. So having that blanket also doubles as a medical thing. But those survival blankets, those Mylar blankets, why not have 1 or 2 of them in that laptop bag? One more thing I'm going to mention you might want to have in there. Fire you can probably make in most urban environments. You can probably figure out a way to make fire with batteries and wires and things like that if you need it. Even just making a spark off batteries and a jumper cable of a vehicle. You can probably get a fire started in an urban environment. I wouldn't worry too much about that. But dirty water, again, if the grid goes down, if you have to salvage water, dirty water can kill quite a few people after a disaster. The water purification tablets, they're much like the Mylar blanket. They're lightweight, they're not expensive, they don't take up a lot of space. Why not have some in this laptop bag? Again, they're very small. You probably would never even notice they were there. There's a lot of them that come in a little tiny container. So why wouldn't you have some of the water purification tablets? Again, dirty water can be a really nasty thing after a disaster. You can't just assume that the water coming out anymore is clean. I don't know if you could assume that on city water in good times, but clean water, and it doesn't take up a lot of space, so why not have some of those in there? The water purification tablets. If you're talking an urban environment, you're probably going to be able to find a container, whether it's a coffee cup or a water bottle out of a trash can, whatever the case might be, you can probably find a container, so I wouldn't worry about a container. Like, that's pretty important in a wilderness situation because making a good container can be quite difficult. But in an urban environment, that's kind of a given. You're probably going to find a container. How many bottles, plastic bottles, are just laying around in an urban environment? But I would have the water purification tablets. So those are some things I would absolutely consider having in that bag. Anyway, I hope you've liked this episode of Alpha Male Podcast. This is kind of a throwback as I'm doing it mobily. I've been driving across the country, literally. My wife and I live as neo-nomads. Praise God Almighty. Just got into Idaho. Just literally passed the state line as I was recording this episode. Don't worry, hands-free microphone. But it's been a trip, let me tell you. I've spent the last little bit living off-grid in the Black Hills. Going to spend a little bit of time in northern Idaho, and then the wife and I plan on, God willing, heading to Alaska for a while. If you guys care about the doings of the podcast. Anyway, if you want to support the podcast, talk about supporting locally owned, USA, American, veteran, this is God's podcast, number one. When you look at the information for this podcast, when it asks for owner, if you see that information, I put in God. Everything I have belongs to God. But if you want to support a veteran business, veteran-run, small business here in America, here it is. For, $5 a month, you can become a patron and support this local, American-made small business run by a combat veteran. If you want to support something like that, you absolutely can. I consider this, first and foremost, a ministry to make godly men strong and strong men godly. And I don't apologize for that. And if you're not a Christian yet, that's okay. I hope that you will be. But this is primarily a ministry. If you want to support that, you want to support the podcast, the ministry, goodshepherdtraining.com, goodshepherdtraining.com. There also should be a Patreon link in the show notes. I try to do quite a bit of Patreon-only content to give the patrons some extra value, but I primarily hope that you'll do it to support this ministry, goodshepherdtraining.com. Okay, with that, tactical tip of the day. Let me think of something urban. It's been a while since I've mentioned this one. I'm going to mention a brand new tactical tip and then one that comes in handy that my wife and I had for our standard SOP. When we lived in a big metropolitan area, we had a rendezvous point, a designated rendezvous point between her job and my job where we would meet. I encourage you to have that. Something we had as part of our kit, we had very strange colors of spray paint. She had like a very vibrant lavender purple, and I had a very obnoxious green color. Not a common color you would see even among tagging in an urban area. We had this to designate signals, to signal each other. If we had been there and had to move on or whatever, we would leave that mark. We also had other designated rally points. So if we had to get home on foot or evade, we had plans. We had bug out plans, and we could use this even if comms were down to communicate with each other, because probably nobody else is going to be doing, X's and O's or whatever our signals were in lavender. That's probably not a thing that's going to happen in a disaster, but it's a quick, easy way to just look at a glance and say, okay, he's been here, he's moved on. There's no need for me to wait here. He's gone to the next rally point. Okay, the other tactical tip that you may want to consider, it's technology-based. It's an app called Zello. And you may think working these tactical teams, we had all kinds of fancy comms, and we did have radios and stuff, but for our plainclothes operations, you know what our high-tech comms were? It was an iPhone, because so many people have iPhones. If I was standing there holding my iPhone, really, nobody's going to bat an eye. In fact, it's probably more strange that I wouldn't be looking at my phone. So an iPhone, absolutely a good way to communicate. Zello, if the CIA, again, wants to crack that code, I'm sure the CIA can probably get into Zello. But Zello is a more secure communication app than you probably use day-to-day for texting and calling. You can use Zello. It even had, at the time we used it, it probably still does, a walkie-talkie feature. So if you have a couple of people that you're trying to communicate with, you may use Zello. We even used it when we were dispersed across the state, and it was like real-time walkie-talkie with a far better range than an actual walkie-talkie. clear communications, even across the state, and like real-time communication. So you may look at the Zello app if you have a tribe, a group to communicate with. Again, if it's a big disaster, just assume the comms are going to go down, because they're probably going to go down. That's why you need a backup plan, like we talked about with the paint. And designated rally points. When I would write, going back to when we were doing the executive protection or all kinds of big events, I would write operation orders, and I would have a rally point and a fallback rally point. If comms went down, the team knew where to meet. They had a plan. It wasn't just like, oh, we'll figure it out, when there's thousands of people running around screaming and shots being fired. They know where to go if comms go down, and comms likely will go down. At least we can all be in one place and then coordinate a plan. But that's important, so I would encourage you to have that. And you don't have to have a tactical team for that. Like, if you have kids in school and there's an active shooter and they can escape, you ought to have a designated rally point that they can go, that they know where you can meet them. As much as you want to, you may not be permitted to get into that area. And if they can escape, you should have a designated place where they can meet you. And that's just one example. You don't have to be the commander of a tactical team to use rally points. It's a good thing to have. As far as the tactical verse goes, again, I am driving, so I'm going to try and go by memory Deuteronomy 28. And I do it in the first person because I absolutely believe that it applies to me. Now it shall come to pass, if I diligently obey the voice of the Lord my God, that the Lord my God will set me high above all peoples of the earth. Let me start over on that. And now it shall come to pass, if I diligently obey the voice of the Lord my God, that the Lord my God will set me high above all nations of the earth. And all these blessings shall come upon me and overtake me, because I obey the voice of the Lord my God. Blessed shall I be in the city, and blessed shall I be in the country. Blessed shall be the fruit of my body, the produce of my ground, the increase of my herds, the increase of my cattle, and the offspring of my flocks. Blessed shall be my basket and my kneading bowl. Blessed shall I be when I come in, and blessed shall I be when I go out. The Lord will cause my enemies who rise against me to be defeated before my face. They shall come out against me one way, but flee before me 7 ways. The Lord will command the blessings on me in my storehouses and all to which I set my hand, and you will bless me in the land which the Lord my God is giving me. The Lord will establish me as a holy people unto himself, just as he swore to me. If I keep the commandments of the Lord my God and walk in his ways, then all the people of the earth shall be afraid of me. And the Lord will grant me plenty of goods, and the fruit of my body, and the increase of my livestock, and the produce of my ground, and the land which the Lord swore to my fathers to give me. The Lord will open to me his good treasure, the heavens, to give rain to my land in season, and bless all the work of my hand. I shall lend to many nations, but I shall not borrow. And the Lord will make me the head and not the tail. I shall be above only, and not be beneath, if I heed the commandments of the Lord my God, which Moses commanded me today, and are careful to observe them. So I shall not turn aside from any of the words which Moses commanded me this day, to the right or to the left, to go after other gods and serve them. I believe that, men, and I hope that you do too. With that, thanks for listening, and have a blessed day.